What comes to mind when you hear the term Jewish-Amsterdam? You probably think of World War II, Anna Frank, or maybe nothing at all. You might have heard of the Jewish Historical Museum, but you definitely haven't been there. The mark that the Jewish community has left in Amsterdam is much bigger than what people would think.
This documentary is just scraping the surface, but to show you that there is a lot more weight to the term Jewish-Amsterdam than you may have originally thought. This documentary will be about the 3 people I think were most impactful before the war, some stories of the war you may have not heard before, and some personal stories of my family during the war.
Put Tina on the phone, son. Well, need to get back with Tina. How you trying to get back from my wife? They love the bad niggas in the bank.
Whatsoever is in God, and without God nothing can be or be conceived. You may have heard that quote before. Does the name Baruch Spinoza ring a bell? It probably does, and for a good reason. He was born in 1632 on the Houtgracht, which back then looked a little like this, but nowadays it looks a little more like
this. Born in a Jewish family, he grew up with Jewish customs and he had to read Torah. But quickly he realized that religion wasn't for him. He was very open about his opinions, and that led him being pushed away by his family.
His poor situation didn't keep him down. He continued to express his thoughts, and somewhere in the 1670s he wrote a book by the name of Tractatus Theologico-Politicusi. In this, he wrote about his views on politics and religion. The book was popular, yet controversial, and it became banned in Holland, but it was still quite easy to get your hands on a copy. Since he didn't make much money out of this illegal book, he made a living out of sharpening lenses in Rijnsberg, a small town close to Leiden.
You might be thinking why I'm praying right now. 'Cause this is God. You see this? God. You see this? Also God. You see this? God.
At least, that's what Spinoza thought. He was what is now known as a pantheist, someone who believes that instead of there being one omnipotent deity, everything is one divinity, or God, if you will. He explained this in his most famous book, Ethica, and that makes him one of the first public pantheists in history.
A happy life isn't what Spinoza had, but he was very courageous in the world of religion by expressing what he believed. So he became a noteworthy character in the history of Jewish-Amsterdam. Goodbye.
Called the Emperor Junior.
Dutch, English, French, Latin, and Hebrew. These are the languages Jonas Daniel Meyer was learning or already knew by only 5 years of age. Meyer was incredibly smart, especially for his time.
Jonas was only 13 when he joined the Atheneum Illustre, one of the most prestigious schools in Amsterdam and the predecessor of the University of Amsterdam. He graduated in 1896 and he became the first Jewish lawyer in Holland, and back then he was only 16.
Besides law and language, he also found interest in social and economical areas. In 1807, he got the opportunity to speak his mind about the living conditions of Dutch Jews to the then active king, Lodewijk Napoleon. The difference it made is debatable, but it does show that he was a well-respected figure in the community of Amsterdam. He was also part of the Constitution Commission between 1813 and 1817, and wrote a 6-part book about European judicial institutions.
His legacy remains in the Jonas Daniel Meyer Plain, where his name will be remembered after many years to come. This square is in the middle of the Amsterdam Jewish Quarter, surrounded by the synagogue and the Jewish Historical Museum.
Now, of course, there weren't only men in the community, but in the 1900s and earlier, women had a lot less freedom in their lives. They couldn't get certain jobs, they couldn't get a degree, and they were often neglected as a part of society. From this oppression arose feminism, and one of the most important figures in feminism in Holland is the Jewish lady Aletta Henriette Jacobs.
Aletta was born and raised in a farmer town of Supermeer, Groningen, back in 1854. Her dad was a doctor and she wanted to follow his steps. But that required a degree. But back then it was unheard of. Persistent as she was, she wrote a letter to the Dutch Minister of Internal Affairs about her desires.
He quickly replied and granted her wish. In 1871, Aletta Jacobs officially became the first female university attendant of Holland at the Rijksuniversiteit Groningen. In 1879, she completed her attendance with a staggering list of accomplishments. She passed her doctorals, propedeutic, candidate, and national doctor's exams, and also received a promotion to officially earn herself her doctor's degree.
Her popularity began here in Amsterdam back in 1879, when she became the first female doctor of Holland, mainly focusing on women and children. She also set up free consultation hours for women with low income.
But it didn't stop there for her. The last goal on her to-do list was to inaugurate the right for women to vote. This took over 20 years of constant fighting, beginning with the founding of the Association of Women's Voting Rights with Wilhelmina Drucker. In 1919, they succeeded, when the women's voting right was officially introduced. At the time, she was 68 years old.
She never conceived children of her own. Her only pregnancy sadly resulted in miscarriage. But she didn't pass on in form of children. She made up for by the revolutionary changes she made for the female population of Holland. And by the way, this is her house. Now the part you've all been anticipating, World War II.
World War II devastated Amsterdam. It was a traumatic time for anyone who lived through it. It brought out the best and the worst in people, which is what I want to showcase through various stories that originated in the war. Johan van Hulst has a commendable resume. He was part of the Dutch parliament for 25 years and was also a professor at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. Born in 1911, he is now 106 years old, which makes him the second oldest person in Holland. But the time he will never forget, even at his current age, are his 22 years of teaching at the Reformed Seminary in Amsterdam between 1938 and 1960.
So what's so special about his job at the seminary? The location. The Germans began deporting people to labor and concentration camps from Amsterdam in 1942. Before they were put into trains, they needed a collective location. It eventually became the Hollandse Schouwburg, over there. Across the street there was a kindergarten, where they would keep all the Jewish infants. Now Johan had a role in this because he worked at the seminary, which is located right next to the kindergarten.
There was also another pawn in the situation, Walter Suskind. A German-born Jew, he was assigned the task to manage the Schouwburg back in 1942. He used that as his cover-up to meddle with the administration, so he, Johan van Hulst, and other allies could sneak children out of the kindergarten. They famously used a tram that would stop in front of the Schouwburg to their advantage. When the tram would arrive, they would sneak the children out quickly, so the guards wouldn't see them. Johan van Hulst received the Yad Vashem Award in 1973, and he was also honored by the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in 2012.
Could you tell me what made you do it?
It was so that my school at the crash where they was, at the crash was also the Jewish child, but there was only one way to escape, through the garden of my school, with the building of my school, to the freedom. And so we have saved more than 500 children, but less than 1,000 children.
With one soul,
The
the
whole
whole world saves an entire universe.
Yeah.
You saved hundreds of universes. So I want to thank you again for, you know, I want to thank you in the name of the Jewish people, but also in the name of humanity.
There was also a movie released about Walter Susskind in Holland in 2012, accordingly called Susskind. Dries Riphage is proof that not everyone gets punished for their wrongdoings. He was one of the most malicious people in the war, and there were a lot of options to choose from. When the war began, Riphage was 30 and had long been involved in the underworld of Amsterdam, even having received the nickname Al Capone.
Thank you. Café Machi, this very cafe, was a very common meeting place for German soldiers, criminals and gay people back in the 1940s. Dries was a very common visitor, and so he overheard the conversation of the Germans, and when he heard they were hunting Jews, Dries saw a profitable opportunity and he became a Vertrauensmann for the SD.
But just turning them in wasn't enough for him. He would make the Jews believe he would save them from arrestation, and in return they had to pay him with money, jewelry, or art. He would take the loot and have them arrested by the Germans the very same day. It is estimated he's responsible for over 200 deportations. After the war, Dries escaped Holland in February 1946 with the help of a friend from the Dutch Bureau of National Security. The brother of his federal friend was a renter of motor vehicles, so they put Dries in a coffin and drove him to Belgium. In the trunk they also had a disassembled bike that they reassembled in Belgium. From there he biked his way to Spain. The rest of his life he spent mostly living in Argentina or traveling through Europe. He passed away age 64 in Switzerland and was never caught or punished for his war crimes. Similarly to Walter Susskind, Riphage also had a movie made about him. It came out in Holland in 2016 and starred Jeroen van Koningsbrugge.
I guess that's what I love most about her. You know, she isn't just one thing. She's so much larger than that.
One of the most famous attractions in Amsterdam is Artis. It was the first two to have been opened in Holland and has always had plenty of sights to see. It is located right next to the Jewish quarter, and it is often forgotten that this was a safe haven for all people in the war.
Of course, Artis' popularity scored higher than ever before, but during the war, Artis was surprisingly popular as well. It was one of the few places where people could truly take a break from all the terrible things going on, and even the Germans were a big fan of this place.
Something that is often forgotten is that between 150 and 300 people took shelter from the Germans there. The then active director, Armand Louis Jean Signet, stayed on good terms with the Germans in the hopes of avoiding a search for Jews in the zoo. Many people were allowed in to hide in various parts of the zoo.
But it was the most effective hiding place in Artis, the open roads. The animal caretakers would make a bridge for people to cross over using a plank, and then remove it right after. The German never suspected anybody hiding in there, and no one was ever found.
The shelter was partially sabotaged in 1941, however, when a failed bombing by English air forces on a German train landed on various parts of Artis. To then add insult to injury, it also became banned for Jewish people to go to Artis entirely in the late summer of 1941, but this was mildly controlled, so hidings proceeded throughout the war. The true hero of Artis is Director Signet, who has made sure to stay on the Germans' good side to be able to help as many people as he could. He even provided fake IDs for the Jewish people in the zoo to escape, and was also a true animal fanatic. He saved the European bison from going extinct in the 1920s. He made sure there was enough food for his animals during the war, even at the cost of people, and also had a secret electricity generator ready for when the power went out completely in 1945. He has been there for people and animals all throughout his life, and has always been modest about his heroic achievements. In this chapter, I like to share some stories from my grandmother and great aunt. Neither of them were born in Amsterdam, but they were both born closely around the war. They have experiences that could give some insight on the effect of the war on Jewish survivors.
Goedenavond.
Goedenavond. Jouw naam is?
Jeannette.
Hello.
Hello.
Where were you born and when?
I was born in Utrecht in October 39.
Wanneer je precies bent geboren, weet je?
Dat kan ik me nog wel herinneren. Dat was 3 april 1947.
Je ouders waren, hoe oud waren zij toen ze?
Mijn vader was van 1906 en mijn moeder van 1910.
How exactly were your parents able to survive the war?
They were able to survive because we were on the Barneveld list. It's a special list of very famous people in Holland, but my father was a teacher and one of his pupils was Evert Vermeer, who worked in the underground, and he put him on the list. And the Germans promised not to only to put us in a camp, but not to, we shouldn't go out of Holland, never.
Was jouw jeugd anders, omdat je zo dicht na de oorlog was geworden?
Ik denk het wel. Ik denk wel dat het anders was, want er zat 7 jaar tussen mijn zus en mij, omdat de oorlog daartussen zat. En ik was het kind wat alles goed moest maken en goed moest doen. Om niet dingen die niet goed gingen te vertellen, want wat ik niet goed vond gaan, dat had natuurlijk niks te maken met wat er allemaal in de oorlog gebeurd was.
What camps did you go to?
And from Barneveld we went to Westerbork. And then we stayed quite a long time in Westerbork, but then there was nobody to send away anymore. They took the Barneveld group. We were one of the last transports from Holland. The 4th of September 1944, we went to Theresienstadt.
You lived there for?
In Theresienstadt, 7 months.
7 months.
Yeah, we were from September till we were liberated in May.
Voor haar, dat vind ik altijd wel grappig eigenlijk. Voor Dientje zat het altijd van, ik weet helemaal niet dat het akelig was, want ik wist niet beter. Voor haar was het gewoon in het kamp.
What do you yourself remember from living there?
I was with my mother most of the time, so I haven't got bad remember. I remember all the good things, not bad things.
What can you tell me about your transition from living in camps to living a regular life in a city?
It was very hard for me, very hard, because I didn't understand anything after the war. I didn't understand you can buy things. I didn't understand shops. It was hard because I was used to live 2.5 years always with the same group. And then suddenly you are with different people and I was very shy.
Weet je hoe de algemene mensen over de oorlog praten daarna?
Oh, er waren ook antisemitische uitingen en mensen waarvan wij wel wisten van die zijn NSB'er geweest of die hebben verkeerde dingen gedaan in de oorlog. Dat wist je wel van. En daar waren ook winkels bijvoorbeeld waar mijn moeder niet wilde kopen omdat die mensen in de oorlog fout waren geweest.
When in the beginning of your life, when you lived there, you didn't fully understand what was going on. But after the war, when and how did you come to understand exactly what happened?
How later on, when I read about it, and at home we didn't talk about it. Nobody talked about the war anymore. Afterwards, we knew people didn't come back. That's what they called it. They didn't come back. That were our aunts and cousins. Everybody didn't come back, but we didn't understand why and what happened.
Oh ja, heb jij ooit nog wat gehoord over hoe je ouders werden ontvangen na de bevrijding?
Ja, heel slecht. Heel slecht. Werden door mensen, ze hadden dus spullen in bewaring gegeven bij vrienden. En daar kwamen ze na de oorlog aan de deur van, jullie hebben serviezen en weet ik veel, dat soort spullen van ons, zilver. En ze werden aan de deur opgewacht van, we hebben helemaal niks van jullie, terwijl ze het zo konden zien staan in de kamer. Dus heel slecht. En ook heel slecht, er was helemaal geen psychologische opvang. Dus van, nou ja, zoek het maar uit. Ook heel slecht door het Rode Kruis.
Has it changed you much?
Changed me, I don't know. How can I say it changed me? I don't know. I think our whole generation changed.
Nou,
Dank u wel.
graag gedaan hoor.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So what remains? Of the Jewish community, not so much. In 1940, the year of the German invasion, over 80,000 Jewish people lived in Amsterdam, accounting for about 10% of the population. In 1947, after the war, over 70% had been liquidated in concentration camps, meaning the Jewish people were accounted for only 1% of the population. That number hasn't increased since then, as it still is only 1% today.
But lacking people has made up for by the dozen of monuments spread all around the city. Just like this one, it was a Jewish boys' orphanage. Back in March of 1943, 100 of them were taken away to the concentration camp Sobibor, and so many more are spread all around the city.
But that's not everything the Dutch community has done to make sure no one ever forgets what happened in those years. The Jewish Cultural Quarter is a fantastic organization striving to keep the Jewish history alive. They manage the Hollandse Schouwburg, which is soon to become the Shoah Museum, and they also have the seminary, which is becoming the National Holocaust Museum. Finally, there's a national monument in the middle of the Dam. On the 4th of May, a national memorial attended by the royal Dutch family is held there.
Ultimately, people will forget. Even today, only 54% of the world's population have heard of the Holocaust, and not even a century has passed since then. And that's what we need to try.
Try.
To remember.
In a lifetime.
Yeah. Once in a lifetime, a golden opportunity, golden like the sand that you finally took me through. The sea was holding tight my hand while I dipped a toe into the sea. I smiled like an idiot, but you still sort of sleuthing me. Hair up beautifully, considering the future. We were hitting up the candy shop and I felt truly super. Had never seen a place in time that I would stay in place to see that question resting on our minds. Like, would you run away with me? Yeah, okay, how about it? We could start a new life, living beach house days and garden view nights, and maybe think back